Hi. The film I will be talking about today is Places in the Heart. This film was written and directed by Robert Benton and was released in 1984. This film stars Sally Field, Danny Glover, and John Malkovich. Robert Benton, it's sad that he's not as well known because he has done such great work. He wrote the screenplay for Bonnie and Clyde. He wrote and directed The Late Show, which, if you haven't seen that film, watch it. It's got Art Carney and Lily Tomlin. I own it myself. I'll probably be doing a video on that one later on. It's a great film. He wrote and directed Kramer versus Kramer, and he also wrote and directed this film. I would say this is probably his most personal film. It takes place in the very town he was born and raised in, Waxahachie, Texas, and it took me a while to figure out how to pronounce that. And he was born there. This is a town that's about 30 minutes away from Dallas, Texas. It's set in 1935, and he tells this story with such an honest affection, but it's not whitewashed. This isn't a sentimental Disney-like story of, his whimsical childhood. It's a warts and all portrayal of what life was like back then, which makes it ring true. And what's so beautiful about that is I remember first seeing this movie as a little kid. My parents loved this film. It was shown all the time at our house. It was one of those that I'm going to date myself here, when we'd go to Blockbuster, we would always check this one out. And I loved this film even as a kid. And it proves something that I think a lot of writers and filmmakers have forgotten. And Bonnie Hunt was the first person I ever heard say this. Emotion is timeless. The world is always changing. We go from the days of a phone where you had to go like that, to then landlines, where you just poke, to now nobody even has a phone. It's all that type of phone. Your phone is basically a computer. Back in the day when you wanted to ask somebody out, you actually had to call them. Now you would DM them, whatever. But the feelings that go along with that, the emotions that go with that, remain the same. Heartache is just as real today as it was in 1935. Loss hurts just as much. And there was a show, The Wonder Years, and it was set in 1968. That's when it started. And I identified more with that show than any other show that was taking place in the times in which I was growing up. I identified with the main character, Kevin Arnold, who was played by Fred Savage, because what it dealt with were the real emotions that go with adolescence. And even though his took place in the 60s, those emotions were just as real in the 90s. Now, the context that surrounded them may have been different, but inside, it was just as hard being a teenager in the 90s as it was in the 60s, and the angst and the longing and the first loves. Those things remain the same. And it's too bad that so many writers and directors nowadays seem to be a slave to the trend and think that if they were to do a period piece, it wouldn't work, or if they do something that's a little outside the mainstream, nobody will appreciate it because it won't ring true to today's world. And I don't think they have enough faith in the audience anymore, and probably rightfully so. But I'm so grateful that there were writers and directors and people like Robert Benton that were still willing to go ahead and tell stories that were personal, extremely personal. He even shot this film in Waxahachie, Texas, shot it on location. He didn't go somewhere and they tried to stage what his hometown was like. He went to the source. And there's even moments, even like I said, that even though it took place in 1935, the scenes with the children, I could relate to them, of just being outside and playing. They had a much harder life than me, but it was one that I could still somewhat connect to. And the magic of being a child, there's always something about that that's kind of universal. It doesn't ever change. And he did a good job at capturing that in this film. And this film is about a family that is torn apart right from the get-go. The father, who's the sheriff, goes out to respond to something going on in town and ends up being shot. It's an accidental thing. The boy that did it had no malice in his heart. He was a young black man, about 13, 14 years old, kid really, who had been drinking and thought that the gun wasn't loaded anymore and did it playfully, and life changes. And Sally Field's character, Edna, now has to rise to being the head of the household. And her world changes on a dime. Because right before he was shot, they're having dinner, planning what they're going to do, and then all of a sudden, everything changes. And seeing her stand up to that, and the characters that then come into her life, these other people who have kind of been pushed to the side, these misfits in society, that then, and she doesn't seek them out, they just seem to show up. One of those is Mose, played by Danny Glover. Moses, but he goes by Mose in the film. And a thing about Danny Glover, I have to say, we all know about his sad diagnosis with Alzheimer's. This was his favorite film that he ever did. And his performance in this film was a tribute to his mother, who was killed in a car accident the day he was cast in this film. And what a tribute it is. He is so good in this film, is playing someone who is resilient, sagacious, decent, and seems to be a survivor who knows that every day is going to be a challenge because the deck is stacked against him so incredibly. This is a time where racism was not just, it was sanctioned. We had laws on the books to protect it. And so somebody like him every day is a daily struggle. And he comes across Sally Field's character Edna early in the film just asking, is there anything I can do for you, any work, anything of that nature? And she's like, I'm sorry, but no. And then he explains to her about if she were to plant cotton and, let him stay there, they could maybe do something. And normally that idea would mean nothing to her. Yet someone from the bank has told her, your best bet is to just sell this house and try to find, a relative that might take in one of the kids and you can pay off some stuff with that. But, she's never worked. She was a homemaker. So that idea sticks with her. She's willing to try it. She then takes in another boarder, the guy from the bank who was telling her to sell her house has a brother-in-law who was blind from an injury in the First World War. And he's pretty much just basically saying, well, I figured you could do well renting a room to him and he could pay you some money and it might actually help. And then she's like, it's just not a good time. And then he basically kind of tells her, we at the bank would kind of really appreciate that you do this. And then she realizes he's not really asking. He's trying to unburden himself of his brother-in-law and say, here, stay here. And this character, Mr. Will, is played by John Malkovich. And he wants no part of being there either. She tries to be friendly to him from saying, is there anything I could cook for you? Things like that. And he lets her know straight up, I don't want to be here any more than you want me to be here. I'll try to stay out of your way. Please stay out of mine. And we should get along just fine. Sorry, I got a little tickle in my throat there. And she accepts it. And what's so great in this film is the way that we see Mr. Will, Mose, Edna, the kids, Frank and Possum, come together. And after her family is initially destroyed, this new family just seems to come together and they start to function. Now, does it mean that she doesn't miss her husband anymore? No. But it kind of goes back to that thing when one door closes, another one opens, and how people seem to just come into our life and we weren't even waiting for them, we weren't even wanting them. And then after we take them in and accept it, we don't know how we would have gotten by without them. And the way that Benton is able to make this happen organically, not just overnight. And I think back to a film like Remember the Titans, where they just go to a football camp and all of a sudden he says your friend hadn't been blocking on that, and he calls them out, and now they love each other. And they're all, singing Ain't No Mountain High Enough and stuff like that, that now all their prejudices have just melted away and they're one big happy family. In this film, it feels real. We see how they start to realize they need each other, whether they want to admit it or not, and how they want to be there for each other. And it happens slowly and it happens organically. And Sally Field, who is so good at playing tough women, she won the Oscar for Norma Ray, and she won an Oscar for this role. This is when she gave the infamous "You Like Me" speech, which it's sad that that's what people remember about that acceptance speech, because what they should remember is what won her the Oscar, this great performance. She is able to be tough and tender at the same time. She never loses her femininity. She is always delicate without seeming fragile. And I don't know how she does it in this film. She can stand up against things that would make most of us crumble. And she does it in a way that is not off-putting. You're still pulling for her. And you don't really know where it's coming from, because we see her gradually turn into this. We see this woman who, in the beginning, she's saying, my husband took care of everything. I don't even know what we have in the bank right now. Emerge as the figurehead, the head of the household. And she does it beautifully. And at a certain point, she realizes they're falling behind. And there's another scene in the film, and I just want to talk about this, where she goes to visit her sister, who's played by Lindsay Krause, who was married to David Mamet, and her daughter was on the show Girls with Lena Dunham. And she's really good in the film as Margaret. And she asks, before she has decided to make a go of it, in the planting cotton, is there any way I could help you here? I may not know much, but I'm sure I could help you. And she says, I'm sorry, I can't even keep myself. I'm barely making enough to keep the lights turned on myself. I can't afford to take anybody else on. And she said, that's fine. And she tries to give her some money, and she won't take it. And she said, please, if you don't, her husband will just spend it on some fool thing. And she looks at her, she says, I don't need it. And she just kind of sits back and says, you're just like Daddy. He'd rather saw off his leg than take something from somebody. And even earlier in that scene, she goes in with her two kids, and they ask, is her daughter there? And she said, no, she's out with her daddy. But she said, I got 2 Coca-Colas in the icebox. And they have to look at their mom. She goes, okay. And when they take off, she says, you guys share one. Even then, even in a situation like that, even though there's 2 Coca-Colas for 2 kids, you just share one. You never take more than what you have to. And her sister says, no, that's okay. They can both have one. And then, what do you say, kid? Thank you. It's sad that that type of ethos is lost today. We've become so much more of a gluttonous society. We want more. We have a buffet laid out in front of us, and yet we're always complaining about how hungry we are. These people truly had nothing. It was the kind of family meals where you don't get more than you need, because there's a lot of people at this table. And while I don't envy that, I wouldn't have wanted to grow up like that, it did produce a better product, a better caliber of human being. And as we evolved as a society and made all these advances forward and became more of a suburban society, more of an industrial society, less of an agricultural society, a lot of good came from that, but a lot was lost as well. And it's sad that we can't seem to make these steps forward without losing some of what made so many of the people of that generation who they were, people that we could depend on when it came time to fight a world war. Whereas now, you have parents taking selfies with their kid, you have people going to see the Savannah Bananas. It's hard to picture anybody from that day and time. enjoying that type of stuff, worrying about who's marrying who in the press. It was truly a time you worried about yourself, your family, and you minded your own business, kept moving forward. And it'd be nice if we could get back to that. And as the film moves on, she realizes that if she can bring in the first cotton, first bale, first gin, that she'll make enough money to kind of keep things afloat. Danny Glover and John Malkovich, there's no way, ma'am. And she gives one of those Oscar-winning Norma Rae type speeches where she said, I don't care if it kills me. I don't care if it kills you. We're going to do this. I won't give up. And if the two of you do, you can go straight to hell. And they do come through. And watching how the people in the community, how the kids get out there, how they all band together, that sense of we're in this and we're going to do it. And no one ever complains. No one ever says I'm tired. Nobody ever says my back hurts. You just do it because it has to be done. And again, it would seem as though I'm building to this is the happy movie. They bring it in, everything ends well, but it doesn't. When she goes to negotiate the price, the man that she's doing it with is noticing how Mose, Danny Glover's character, has given her some advice that has made it a lot harder for him to be able to take advantage of her in this negotiation. So later on in the film, the Ku Klux Klan shows up. And they rough him up. They don't kill him. Mr. Will goes out there and kind of intervenes as best he can. But before they leave, one of them drops down and says, we're not through with you yet. And eventually Edna returns and she goes out in the barn and he's packing up and he said, it won't be too long before they decide to come back and I can't be here then. And before he leaves, she says, I just want you to remember you took a no-account piece of land, people that didn't know what they were doing, and you farmed it like nobody could. You brought in the first bale this year. Don't ever forget that. And he just smiles and says, yes, ma'am. I reckon I did that. And again, Benton could have just let us have that happy ending. But life isn't like that. Anytime we have a victory, there's some type of defeat around the corner. That's what makes life the roller coaster that it is. There's another scene in the film, I'm kind of going all over the place here, but it's a really beautifully written scene and beautifully acted, where John Malkovich's character, Mr. Will, is in the kitchen with Sally Field. And they're sitting there at the table, and he said, could you tell me what you look like? She explains to him her looks in detail, and he just kind of sits there taking it in. And hearing and seeing Sally Field describe herself to someone who has no sight, but who's so close to her in some ways, but will never be able to see her in person. That scene is very short, but it's very poignant, and it stays with you enough so that even though that doesn't relate to them bringing in the cotton, I wanted to talk about it in this video. It's worthwhile. And it reminds you how many films seem to lose those quiet, subtle, poignant moments, that you don't need the big, long monologue. What you really need is just two people talking. And you get a lot of that in this film. True human relationships that we can all appreciate and identify with. This film also has spiritual overtones. It starts off with the song Blessed Assurance. It ends in a way that is such a powerful punch. I don't want to give it away, but it ends with them at a church. And if you've never seen it, watch with me. You'll come away with goosebumps. I mean, it sounds cliche to say that, but I can remember it hit me like a ton of bricks when I saw it. And even though I won't give away what the scene is and what happens, I will say what I took from it, which is we're all in this together. And at the end of the day, it's not about Republican, Democrat, North, South, conservative, liberal, where you stand on things. We're all just people. And all we really have are each other. And in a world right now where we're so fixated on party affiliation or what label we want to put on ourselves, what tribe we're with, this whole thing of almost like, well, I'm with this team, I'm with that team, and how news channels seem to be nothing more than pep rallies for their political party. Take all that away. We're all people that are going to go through something in our life. And wouldn't it be nice if we could start to see what we have in common, what unites us, and focus a little less on everything we don't have in common? Because there's, whether you're conservative or liberal, almost every family's going to deal with something like cancer, something like dementia, something like Alzheimer's, financial strife, infidelity. There's not one gender, there's not one race, social class that's immune from it. We're all vulnerable to it. So it would be good if we could learn to have each other's back and fight this fight together the way this family did. And as I said, part of what made me want to rewatch this film recently was hearing about Danny Glover, and when he said this was his favorite film, and he's done a lot of good films with, Witness, the Lethal Weapon series, Beloved, The Color Purple. He's done a lot of good work, but I would agree with him. This is his best role, this is his best film, and that says a lot. And while he may never work again with this type of a catalog, he will live on. He's not going anywhere. And I think we all thank him for the years of entertainment. Until next time, thanks.